Hey guys, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you are in. We are live with our latest hostel management panel discussion. This month's topic is volunteers in hostels. This is a very hotly debated topic, both because people believe in using them or want to use them but don't know how to find them, how to manage them. It's very common, both problem and solution for hostels. So we're very excited to talk about it today. We have some great panelists. I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves off the bat. Juliana, we'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity today. So I'm Juliana. I'm currently working with Cloud Beds, but I was a former volunteer coordinator in a hostel. I was as well a volunteer myself in hostels. And I also worked with an online platform for recruiting volunteers at Worldpackers.
Perfect. Lots of experience. And Effie?
Hey, my name is Effie. I'm from Israel. In the past, I was a volunteer myself in Spain, in Granada. Then I was managing volunteers in a hostel in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And now I'm owning a hostel in Brazil, in Pipa, and having many volunteers.
Awesome. Thank you. You look so comfy in your hammock.
Brazil.
Alex and Jamili?
Hi, we're Alex and Jamili. Alex and Jamili, in case you couldn't figure that out. Wholesale hostel in Fortaleza. Owner, never been volunteers, but we've had lots and lots of experience with them.
Yeah, the hostel 2.5 years ago, and then we've always worked with volunteers since the beginning.
And how long did you say it's been open?
2.5 years, 2 years and 6 months.
Okay, awesome. And for those who don't know, Fortaleza is also in Brazil. So we've got two Brazils today. So you guys aren't in a hammock, but you still look cool. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys for introducing yourselves. I'm stoked to hear all the information you have for us. So we will jump right in. So if you can first give a general background for either your current hostel or Juliana for the hostels that you worked with. What's the general makeup in terms of volunteers? Is it all volunteers? Is it part paid staff, part volunteers? And how long did they usually tend to stay? So Alex and Jamili, we'll start with you.
So we have 5 paid staff, cleaners, 1 nightman who's sort of freelance. She doesn't work every night, as we don't need it every night. 1 Alex, 1 Jamili, and 1 manager. When we're not around, we hire an extra volunteer manager so that the guy below us can focus more on everything. And he's responsible for right now the managers or managing the volunteers, the finances, and we sort of work more on improvements to the hostel. And our night man just sleeps.
And how long did they stay? Like right now, we have volunteers, our team now, they've been with us for like 2 months.
Okay.
They don't seem to be leaving, so we require a minimum 2 weeks, but we don't have any max of stay.
Okay.
But we like to generally keep people around. After a month, sometimes people get too comfortable. And so we generally have we sort of sit down and have a talk about still doing because we could be here.
That may be time to move on if they're not really vibing right anymore. I think that's a pretty common theme, and we can get into that a little bit more. But when you said your cleaners that you mentioned, the 5 cleaners, they were paid or they're volunteers?
The cleaners are paid because we do a proper job. The volunteers do help clean and maintain cleanliness, but she's the one who scrubs everything out, you know.
Yeah. And so how many about volunteers do you take in terms of the paid staff you mentioned?
5 volunteers, so we're like 50-50.
Okay, cool, perfect. And Effie, what about you? How many volunteers do you have versus paid staff? How is that breakup made for you?
So in my hostel, we have 2 paid staff. One of them is the manager, and the other one is for cleaning. and we have 8 more volunteers. They're doing many things. We have a yoga hostel. So we have a yoga instructor that's making the yoga in the morning. We have dinner every night. So one is the chef. Actually used to work as a chef, and every time I'm changing every 2 months. For cleaning, for maintenance, for different projects, for art. And there are many things that are happening daily for bartender because the bar is open every night. So yeah, I have much more volunteers than paid workers, but I always try to find the talented or the most motivated volunteers and give them an extra, like in between worker and volunteer, and give them some bonuses. And yeah.
And how
So
do you,
that's,
when you say something in between volunteer and paid worker, what are those kind of extras that you're doing?
to give them a private room when we have availability, to give them a free surf class, these kind of things. To give them a bit, yeah, if it can be also a paid bonus or.
Okay.
But that's what I'm trying to do, like to make the volunteers, the in between, and the paid workers.
Okay, so giving them those extra perks beyond what their straight work exchange is for.
Yeah, more responsibility and yeah, and more feeling of actually doing things and changing things. And
okay, great. And how long do they tend to stay? What's your kind of turnover, especially with having the core of your hostel being volunteers?
yeah, so I just made like an average from all the volunteers I had since the beginning, and the average is about 2 months and a half.
Okay. How long
yeah.
have you been open?
Which I believe months and a half is like the maximum time for volunteers, because after that, like you said before, they feel too comfortable, and then you find yourself working harder to make them work. And I think the advantage about having volunteers, it is a place is dynamic all the time. As there are new guests, there are new people that work in there. It's always fresh, and I think it's very important to keep it this way.
Great. And how long has your hostel been open?
9 months.
9 months. Okay, awesome. And Juliana, what is your experience with having managed volunteers at a hostel, having been a volunteer? How long do you see volunteers tend to stay? And have you been at hostels? What's the makeup of percentage-wise?
Yes, well, I worked in a hostel in Serbia, in Belgrade, and I also volunteer in hostels still in the Eastern Europe, like was in Russia. So the profile is that many hostel owners were not used to receive volunteers back the time. That was like 3 years ago. So I kind of started up there in Belgrade, and with the hostel owner I was working with, I was able to educate them of the benefits of receiving the volunteers. But we used different skills. They had paid staff for housekeeping. They had interns for the reception. And we used more innovative and creative skills that would help them improve their hostel business. So we used digital nomads, social media marketers, web designers, also some artistic skills like Ophir is using as well, to bring a better guest environment and also help them improve their positive reviews on all the booking channels. So it would attract more guests later on. Regarding the duration of stay, it's pretty much what everyone has said. If you keep them too long with you, it will lower down their motivation. What I encourage is to have, as Jamili said, a minimum of 2 weeks of stay, and goes up to 4 to 6 weeks maximum, because if they stay too long, they will lose their motivation, they will lose their energy, they will start to do repetitive, tasks, and it's not good for you, it's not good for your guests. And if you do create a good volunteer program and experience, you're going to receive more applications, and you always will have volunteers that want to go and stay at your hostel.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized I didn't really introduce myself at the beginning. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Courtney, and I've got several years of managing hostels as experience in terms of my volunteer experience. And I would agree with what everyone's saying. The hostel that I last managed in San Francisco ran pretty solely on volunteers. It was me and them. And I was there for a good 4.5 years. So I definitely have seen everything you guys are saying. We actually kept volunteers for a bit longer. My minimum for something like cleaning was even just a few days. We really tried to help extend people's travels if they wanted to pitch in just for a day or two. or maybe a couple weeks, because we did take volunteers for cleaning, whereas most people, or it seems like a lot of people, will do that as hired out. But we actually had volunteers running reception that would stay for 3-4 months, but it is very difficult to find good volunteers that can stay that long and stay motivated and fresh. So it's a rock and a hard place sometimes, that it's better that you're not having to constantly train for a role that's more responsibility like reception. But keeping them excited and motivated and fresh is definitely tricky. Effie, do you have something you want to add?
No, for now, no.
Okay, I thought you were like, hey, me. You're like raising your hand. Okay,
Right, it
cool.
was a fly.
Perfect. All right. So then moving on to just a couple more quick general questions, both on living arrangements and on the amount of hours worked in terms of what they get. So what do they have to get, or what do they have to work for what they get? Is it a dorm bed? Do they have a private room? I know Effie said you try to upgrade them sometimes. And with that, even if they're in a dorm, is it with the general guests or is it a separate staff dorm? So what are your arrangements there? Effie?
Okay, so it's I do it a bit differently. So we have one dorm room only for volunteers, which has 4 beds. They're sleeping there. And if I see people that are super friendly, I give also 2 spaces in the normal dorms that they can sleep with the guests. And for the other 2, they're sleeping in tents and working less hours. So this is the arrangement of sleeping they have in my hostel.
Okay, and how many hours, or what is the arrangement of what they have to do to get that?
So yeah, so what they get is they work 5 hours per day, 5 days a week, 2 days off. They get a bed, breakfast, and we have dinner every night. So they pay, let's say, $1 for the dinner, like the cost that we have. 50% of everything we have in the hostel. So it means beer for $1. Like everything is just like the cost we pay. And also we have some, every month we're doing an activity together, going to the beach, going to a restaurant, something like that. And also if they're doing the job good, then they get more benefits, like I started to say before. The people that sleeping in the tents doing a bit less hours because the conditions are a bit not the same as to sleep in the dorm room. And yes, this is
okay, perfect. So about roughly 25 hours a week in exchange for a bed.
exactly
Little things. Cool.
Yeah.
And Juliana, what was the arrangements that you've had as personal, and what have you seen as a general in terms of having worked with World Packers, and what is an average that a hostel asks?
Yes, I myself, even when I coordinate through the volunteer program and when I volunteered myself, I really first look at what are the skills and the job description. I mean, you cannot ask travel blogger to work as many hours as someone at the reception, for example. But I recommend up to 30 hours a week maximum, with 2 or 3 days off in the week. This also helps keeps the volunteer motivated, and the volunteer will get back the next day with a lot of energy to continue his work. And in terms of benefits, I believe, of course, the accommodation doesn't matter if it's a shared dorm with the guests, or if it's an only staff room, or if it's a private room. I mean, giving the accommodation is a great help for the volunteer. At least 1 meal per day, I believe it's also very helpful. You don't have to give 3 meals per day, but giving 1 meal helps the volunteer a lot. And probably any other benefits that you give in addition, it just helps you attract more volunteers. Sometimes laundry facilities helps a lot. Volunteers are usually traveling for a long time, going from one destination to another. So being able to use your laundry facilities is also very helpful for the volunteer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think stuff like laundry falls into those just little extras that you can give. Same with Effie was saying, having, beer at cost instead of a full price. But being able to, even if it's not big extras, like, getting them on a free skydive or something, but just those little things that makes life easier, I think it helps them stay longer, as you said, and feel more comfortable and not have to make ends meet so much. So absolutely. Alex and Jamili?
So they work 4 hours a day? 2 days off. We give them once a week laundry, discount on drinks, discount on tours, free entrance to the club. What else? Yeah, they sleep with the guests in the dorms.
They sleep with the guests. We don't stick them all in one dorm. We move them around to various dorms so we don't all take up one room because we're a pretty small hostel. Other sort of benefits we add on that is sort of up to the guest, because a lot of people, they don't have a lot of money. That's why they're volunteering. So we offer to our staff, like, if you guys want to cook dinner for everybody, you can buy the ingredients and sell the dinner. While, sometimes we do barbecues where I cook and then I charge everybody and I give them a good rate. Other times they want to do something, so we let them sell food, let them sell things in the hostel to try and make their own money. It's a service that we're not going to do.
Okay, so you really give them that opportunity to kind of not just make money, but create their own atmosphere even.
Because I really like the idea of having dinners every night, but I don't always want to cook for everybody every night in the community. And so I also don't want to go do the shopping for whatever someone decides to cook. So if they want to put the work in, they can sort of use our venue as a base, try and help make themselves a little money, and then bring everybody together at the end of the day. Nice.
Awesome. So you guys said 4 hours a day with 2 days off. So you're doing about 20 hours a week in exchange for your things.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool. Perfect. So one of the things you said kind of reminded me of another question that I know we've had issues with using volunteers in terms of living on site, because essentially volunteers live on site versus maybe paid staff. Do you ever have issues with volunteers becoming a little bit cliquey? Because they live on site, they all get to know each other, they kind of form their own little team. I would imagine most hostels are using volunteers to enhance the atmosphere and to really engage with guests and take them out and do that. But sometimes the opposite happens where, they walk into the common room and they're like, oh, new guests. Oh, here are the people I already know. I don't need to go through the whole get to know you thing. Do you guys see this with volunteers? And if so, how do you help break that up? Effie, we can start with you.
So I will start with the experience I had in Israel as a manager in the hostel, because there it was a huge problem. There were many, many volunteers, like more than 10 volunteers, and it was a big problem in the hostel. It was intimidating for new people to arrive because the group was so united and together all the time, and new people just felt intimidated by that, and it was just not good. It was hard to break it. Here in the hostel, from the beginning, I tried to do as much activities as I can that will connect between everyone in general and also between the volunteers and the guests. For example, if we have dinner, that we have 2 volunteers that making dinner every night, I will always in the morning will ask all the guests if someone wants to also help them and be part of it and make a dish from his country, and then to get a free dinner, for example, or free dinner and drinks. And then you create a situation that you have one person from a group of 4 people that joining the volunteers, and then his friends talking with other volunteers. These kind of things. And we have lots of therapies and workshops that we do. So always trying to bring the volunteers with the guests together to do this. And of course, to make them aware of this. When the volunteers are arriving, or even before they arrive, I explain the situation. I explain that it's very beautiful that we have a family and everybody's together and know each other. And I know that in the first week, they are friendly to everyone. But if after 2 weeks, they feel close with the people they are sleeping with, and then we have a problem with the guest. I always explain that as it's important for the volunteers to feel like home, we have to do the same for the guest. Make them aware of this, and also show an example. They see me doing it, they will do it as well. Every reunion we have, once a week, I talk about this. So far, so good. Like the volunteers and the guests, you don't see the difference between the things. Just everybody is together, came to have fun. This volunteer is a traveler that wants to save money, and the guest that came could be volunteering, a week after in a different place. It doesn't matter. Always put in their head and kind of like explaining them how important it is and how much they can get from it. To know so many people from everywhere, then they can travel around and just have a house in every place they go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is it's important.
I think that's a great point that you made of actively reaching out to the guests to join something that the volunteers are doing. Because like you said, a lot of people may not be traveling just alone. So if they join the volunteer, then they have other friends that are in the hostel. It'll start to mingle them as well. So yeah, that's great. Juliana, what about you?
Yes, I think it's about since the beginning, if you're aligning your expectations prior to the volunteer arrival, that you expect the volunteer to blend into the family, not just the staff, but the guests. And I think on a weekly basis, you should also keep it this friendly conversation with the volunteer and keep showing, as Ophir said, be an example, and also go and invite the guests to go out and to have dinner together. Because more you show as an example and more you align these expectations before and during the volunteer stay, easier it will be for you to manage the volunteer and see that the volunteer is really proactively doing what he was supposed to do to engage and improve the atmosphere of the guests in the hostel. Yeah.
Definitely expectations for sure. And we'll get into that in a minute. That's a great point. And Julia and Alex, what do you guys think? Have you had issues with clickiness, and how do you break that up?
When we got back from our last little trip, our manager had actually become very cliquey with all the staff except for one, and they weren't really interacting well with the guests too much either. So when we got back, it was just big problem. We had one staff member who was sort of on the outside of the group. Everybody else spoke Spanish. It was pretty bad to the point where we had to study and start
Including the manager, the volunteers.
We didn't fire the manager, but we helped get her another job until we could get, and then we stepped back in. Led to one really hard couple weeks of doing everything, just like at the beginning.
So you ended up replacing everybody.
Yeah. It's not the first time this has happened where we've had sort of like people who've traveled for a long time start getting really comfortable and almost weirdly mentally abusive towards the rest of the people, towards guests. So when we got back, we're just like, well, we need to change everything. It's not the atmosphere that we want. And now we fixed that problem, so it's all good.
What do you think? Because you've said this has happened before, and I understand it's definitely a recurring problem that can have, maybe not quite to that extent, but in terms of the clickiness, it's something that will come up often, at least in my experience. What do you think you guys would do for the future to avoid that? We've had a couple suggestions from the others. Is there anything you would want to add of how to prevent this?
It's a lot of what Ophir said is you need to remind them that the whole point of your atmosphere is to everybody together. And so whenever we hire someone in their training, I tell them one of the most important things they have to do on their shift, especially if they're working at a bar shift, is they need to socialize with the guests as if, they're friends. And when I start seeing that clickiness, generally the work will be sort of falling apart too. So I have to go and remind them again and again to get back to their position and talk to that guest, and then you can work through it. But you have to keep reminding everybody all the time that it's, they're here to meet people. They're here to travel and to learn, not to be the same way they are back home.
Yeah. I think part of the issue, and this comes back to a bit of what you guys have said about length of stay, and it's starting to wear off, is that I've noticed with my volunteer staff that it just becomes a little bit exhausting to always put yourself out there to new people and to do the whole, where are you from? How long are you traveling? What do you want to do in this city? Like, it gets, emotionally or like physically exhausting, but it also gets tiring and just boring to have the same conversation over and over. And so I would notice that it's not that they didn't want to socialize with staff, but or with guests, but especially if they had had a long day or a long night out, they just didn't have the energy to go through that. And it was a lot easier to just turn to people they knew. And so I would try to encourage them with like questions they could reach out to guests that were beyond the small talk, so to try to encourage them to think about, what's something you love or are passionate about, and find out if anyone else is interested in that. Like, if you love playing the ukulele, like, ask someone, hey, does anyone play the ukulele, instead of just, where are you traveling from? Because if they kind of focused on things that they loved, then it would keep it more interesting for them, and they would inevitably find out someone else also had that interest, or maybe something totally opposite of that interest. But I don't remember who said it. I think it was Alex, maybe all of you, that I think Effie, you as well, that they will mirror what you're doing. If they see you engaging with guests, then they're going to do that as well with some intervention. So I think that's a really good point that you guys raised, that you have to be that model, and, even break up their conversation to be like, hey, if you talk to so-and-so, I just heard they did whatever. And they're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, you would know that if you had talked to them. So it's really great points. But Juliana, you brought up something that I want to circle back to now, and that's expectations. I think this is a huge part of managing volunteers. So I would love you to talk more, that was great English. I would love to have you talk more about this point to start. What are your expectations for your volunteers versus paid staff, and how do you manage those expectations?
So I go first. Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, setting up expectations is really important since the very beginning. So at the very first time when you are recruiting, first of all, you need to know yourself. What skills are you looking for? What's the job description? What will be the working hours? What are you offering in return to the volunteer? You should have everything all figured out before you go and talk to the volunteer, So when you are recruiting that volunteer, you are setting up all your expectations about the job description and what he should do and what's going to be his life with you as a host, right? After that, you need to do kind of a good onboarding. There should be an onboarding. He's a volunteer, but the first day that the volunteer arrives at your hostel is the first impression he will have. If you want your volunteer to blend into your staff family, you need to do it at the first day he arrives. Get together for a dinner or for a drink. Bring him to the family and make him feel comfortable and part of the team. And moving forward from that, while during the volunteer stay, you must continue setting the expectations, continue looking for their performance, reviewing how they're doing, giving them feedback and accepting feedback from the volunteer as well. The volunteer probably came from different destinations, was volunteering in different hostels, and they always have good new ideas to bring to help your hostel grow and make it a better hostel. So setting up expectations is important because it avoids misunderstandings, it avoids disappointment, it will keep the volunteer motivated, and also it will keep you happy, and it will consume much less energy from you than if you were not setting any expectations before, during, and after the volunteer has departure from your hostel.
I could definitely see it being exhausting if you have no expectations, because the reality is you do have expectations, you just haven't clarified what they are. And then, as you said, it's just not going to work out well for anyone. So that was a great answer. I think it's really important. I want to re-highlight what you said about including them from day one, from really minute one, from when they walk into the hostel. Especially, as Effie said, it can be really intimidating when you have a tight group of people for new guests to come in, but it can be just as intimidating for new volunteers who think, oh gosh, am I going to be accepted into this family? Like, I feel like an outsider right now. And your current volunteers may not bring that person in as tightly because they do have their own little thing. So it really is up to you to set that example to bring them in right away. So thank you for highlighting that. Jamili, what do you think about your expectations for volunteers? Do you guys lay these out very clearly from the beginning? How do you manage them as time goes on?
Yeah, like when we first exchange emails, you make sure that like we want people who are friendly, who come here, you're gonna add something to our atmosphere. If you don't think they're the right fit, like truck at the bar, breakfast, like I don't think that's gonna be a place. That's all like our first contact we have. And I agree with Juliana, the very first day is very crucial for the rest of their stay. Because if you're not, if you invite them to sit with you, if you don't do a good training the very first day, I've seen that happen. I've seen me like not do a good thing for the first day, and the rest of the stay was just not good.
Yeah, and we try and do excuse me, a Skype call, just like a 10-minute Skype call, where I actually outline exactly what our hostel is to see if it's a good fit for them, so that they can decide themselves if they will be able to fit into the way we are, so that when they get here, it's less of a surprise if I tell them, yeah, sometimes it can be a little loud, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes we do dinners together, and yeah, outline all responsibilities before they get here. And then when they get here, do a thorough training and hands-on training, so that make sure that they keep doing it. We have checklists and everything.
Yeah, because before if you don't say that, and then they come and they're like, "Oh, you guys are playing loud music till 12. What the hell?" I'm like, "It's a party hostel." Like that's why that's the very first thing we say. It's a party hostel. Don't expect it to be quiet.
Yeah, I think definitely getting expectations out ahead of time. When you were talking about having different roles, you know, like the bar versus breakfast or whatnot, do you wait until the volunteer is there to kind of get an idea? Is that what you were saying? Or you give them a role ahead of time, but you might shift it once they're there?
We move everybody around. So we rotate everybody. Everybody gets all kinds of, everybody gets to try everything once.
And then we also send, like, when we are talking to them in email, we send them the shift and explain everything and the duration of the shift. So if they agree with it, they're like, okay, come and work.
But everybody normally will try out different shifts at different times. And if someone is better for that shift, they generally like that shift better because they're better at it. Some people like to get up in the morning and do breakfast, and that's great. So we'll put them more there. Some people really like to get up early, go out, and then come back and do the afternoon shift and have the evening off, be at the bar. And then some people just really like making food. So
kind
really good people. So
putting people where they feel most comfortable, where they're best, and they'll be most satisfied.
Yeah. So we also make sure that everybody is capable of doing everything, so that they can switch shifts if they want to. We train for the whole hostel. We don't just train for one shift, even if they're not going to necessarily always do that one shift.
That's a really good logistical point to bring up in terms of people wondering how to manage volunteers, to have cross training so that you can swap shifts and things, or if you need to change shifts on someone last minute, that you're not also trying to train last minute. You mentioned checklists as well. I don't know how common this is for hostels for volunteers versus paid staff. I know, paid staff, a lot of training tends to go into it, but I think it's really important, maybe even more so in my opinion, for volunteers, because there is a high turnover. They're not going to ingrain everything to the extent that maybe a long-term, year, 2-year staff person would. So it's going to make your life a lot easier if they have a written record of what they're supposed to be doing, and then you can just check up on that. So that's a really good thing to mention. Effie, what about you? Do you have any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, like as I know that always when people want to get a job or a volunteering job, they are the nicest and the most amazing people in the world, and they have the all talents and willing to do everything. And then they need you kind of. After months, it's the opposite. So in the beginning, first of all, before I set up my expectations, I want to know their expectations. to know what they expect, because people are coming from different countries, different cultures, and the concept of volunteering to work and not to get money, it's pretty crazy for our world, I think. And many people don't understand it and see it in a different way. So I want to see their expectations first before I say my side. I want to see their response. Of course, that I can be selective and see who is telling things only to make me satisfy, and in some answers I can find worrying things as well. After that, I see what I need in the hostel, which position do I need, and I ask them what they like to do. If I will give someone that hates cleaning to do cleaning, it won't be good. So I have to ask them what they want to do, what are the best, or what they want to learn to do. And after that, my expectations are very clear. I'm not angry boss or nothing like this. I will be your friend. I will have fun because we are in a hostel, not in a huge corporation. We just need to have fun and have good vibes and learn and show our talents and all this. And what I want, I always say, I will never be angry and all these kind of things. You won't get any bad vibes from me. But if I will see that you won't be a good friend for your colleagues, and you won't help them when they need you, or if you walk in the hostel and see that things are dirty, or there is a can on the floor and I will see you watching it and not taking it, then it probably will be the game over. That's like, I'm living here for 9 months. The volunteer will live here for 2 months. But the common thing is that's our house. This is where we pee. This is where we shower. This is where we sleep. This is our house in this time. So you have to act like it's your house, and the people there are the members of your family, and the guests are your cousins or stepbrothers. And it sounds a bit cheesy, but I really believe in this, and this is something very important that I'm telling them. If you do it for just to sleep in a bed, just don't. Yeah, it has to come from a different place to actually to share and to have a real experience.
Absolutely. I think that's some really amazing advice. Both a couple things you said. One, that it can't just be for a bed. It needs to be something a lot greater than that. Especially as you pointed out, a lot of people do have different points of view of like doing work without money, even though obviously when you calculate it out, they're making the rate that they would have to pay to stay, but they don't tend to think of it like that sometimes. So if you are finding people who are doing it just for the bed, they probably are going to be dissatisfied because they're going to feel like they're working for nothing, versus those people that are really kind of reaching out from their heart of they want that engaging experience are probably going to be more satisfied for sure. Thank you for that. Along with expectations, we didn't really touch on the second part of it, expectations of paid staff versus volunteers. So we've talked about things we want them to do, but I would imagine you'd want a lot of your paid staff to be doing these things as well, to be engaging with people and whatnot. So how do your expectations differ between the two? Jamili?
Question.
So our paid staff is more administrative. Basically, my manager will work out finances,
Stock,
figure out, what the hostel needs, if we need to make, a huge shopping for everything, and make sure that the volunteers are on their shifts. Mimi and I will work on marketing, trying to figure out how to bring more people into our hostel, especially, if it's the slow season or whatever. We need to work extra hard to get people in. And so we might be out of the hostel a lot, sitting on the computer, trying to come up with ways in which we can attract more people, changing our descriptions. While the volunteers, they're there to make sure that someone's there. We have a very primitive security system in our hostel, which is we have to open the door for everybody. We don't give out keys. And so there always has to be someone there to open the door for the guests. And so they do that, as well as maintain general cleanliness. Like if the bathroom is dirty after the cleaning lady leaves, just give it a quick wipe down, keep it clean. We have a very old house, so we have to clean it extra hard to make sure we keep that cleanliness score up. And they just sort of do the day-to-day tasks, the day-to-day chores that need to be done, the laundry and all that. Our paid staff, our night manager night receptionist works as security and lets people in who go out, party or whatever, and our cleaning lady, she cleans.
Okay.
She has to clean a lot.
So your volunteers are there a lot more for atmosphere and just making sure the day-to-day continues, whereas your paid staff are more the overarching admin.
It's actually, I have to say, they're really, really important for the atmosphere.
Yeah.
We really focus a lot on that, and so the volunteers are one of the most important parts because I can't be there all the time doing that. It's exhausting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just follow them to it.
And Juliana, what do you think? What do you see the difference between expectations of paid staff versus volunteers?
Well, I think no matter if it's a volunteer or a paid staff, as a hostel owner, you expect the person to be motivated, willing to collaborate and help you and excel in whatever tasks they will be doing. In terms of which tasks and skills you use for paid or for volunteer, it really depends. What I've seen most common is like what Jamili is doing as well. Most of the operational tasks like financial, administration, reception is usually done by paid staff. And everything regarding tour guiding, pub call, the social tasks like engaging with guests, being a host, or even digital nomads, travel bloggers, social media, is usually done by volunteers. But I've seen a lot of blended job descriptions, when a volunteer does a little bit of everything, a bit of reception, a bit of housekeeping, and also a bit of social media, for example. And it really depends on you, on your hostel environment, and how you're gonna work out the job description and the skills you're looking for. The most important is expectations are always the same. You need both volunteers and paid staff to work together, to collaborate, to help, and to blend, to be just one and be one family. This is really
Do you
important
find
for
that,
hostel.
sorry to cut you off. Do you find that even though expectations should be the same for volunteers or paid staff, do you find from the volunteer side that maybe their work ethic isn't the same as it would be if it was paid, or does that tend to only become a problem as we've talked about once, a month, 2 months has gone on? Is it more just making sure you're finding the right people for the right length of stay rather than if they're volunteer or paid in terms of work ethic?
Yeah, it is like a mathematical equation, it starts by recruiting and setting up expectations, then by managing, keeping performance. Definitely the length of stay is really important to keep the volunteer motivated, and also to keep yourself turn it on and aware that you cannot get accommodate as well. If you know that there is a volunteer that will be there for 5 months, you kind of get accommodated. I don't have to manage that person that much. And you must always keep an eye on how your hostel business is doing to make sure that you're really doing a good job. As what Jamili and her husband were saying, they are doing the marketing, trying to attract more guests to their hostels. So there is so many things that the hostel manager has in mind. For example, at Cloudbeds, we always encourage our customers to work with volunteers for travel bloggers or digital nomads. This way they can improve their positive reviews on the booking channels or direct reviews on their website and Facebook page if they have a booking engine. So it's length of stay, set up expectations, and also don't get accommodated yourself as a host.
I think that last point is a really good one that I know I've mentioned, not just in terms of volunteers, but in general as a hostel manager. It's kind of the same as when you travel, you get comfortable and then you let your guard down, and then that's where something potentially bad happens, when you're letting your guard down in a situation where you probably really shouldn't be. Not that something's automatically bad going to happen to you, but that's generally if something bad happens, you've let your guard down a little bit. And it's the same kind of thing when you're managing is, as you said, someone's there several months, you think, oh, they know it now, I don't need to check up on them. But everyone needs to be checked up on from time to time. I need to be checked up on from time to time. So it's maintaining that consistency is a really good point. when you mention travel bloggers, because I know some people, some hostel owners don't really know about this too much, or they get approached by travel bloggers and they think, I don't know if this is worthwhile to give a free stay. How do I know? What experience do you have with this, or what advice would you have for hostels to know who they should be taking and what they should be giving in return?
Yes, it's a great skill and a great topic, especially for hostels, because for you to get more direct reservations, which is the dream, of every hostel owner, you need to have a good online branding and presence on your website must be with a good SEO. Your Facebook page must be very active. You need to attract traffic to your online website and your social media. So travel bloggers can help you with writing great articles, video makers and photographers to document how is the hostel life, how is your city, your destination. You can hire digital nomads like web designers to do a new brand new website and SEO, so your website will be more visible once they will be googling some hostels in that region. I mean, there are many ways that you can use travel bloggers and digital nomads to help you increase your online brand and help you get more direct reservations. Direct reservations will not come if a website is a bad website, if there is no traffic to a website, and if you're dead on social media. It's not coming. Then you rely on OTAs for sure, which is okay. It's good to have your hostel listed in many OTAs because you have low season, you still have costs, and you need to sell your beds 24/7. But of course, if you are able to blend and get more direct reservations, and if you use volunteers, why not get volunteers to help you increase your online presence and get more direct reservations?
Absolutely. And do you think there's a certain number of, hits that a travel blogger should be getting before because anyone can say they're a travel blogger and maybe their blog, their mom's reading it and that's it. So how would a hostel owner know, or what should they be looking for in terms of who's really worthwhile to have them? Obviously, if they're a volunteer already, that's, one thing, maybe that's something extra they're doing. But what about someone who comes just as a travel blogger?
Yeah, it's during the selection process, I always asked for previous work. So if they wrote an article to some other blogs or on other websites, so I asked them to share the link. If they're photographers and video makes, to share some of their work. Ask for their Instagram or Facebook to see what kind of posts do they do. If they work it on some, always ask for their previous work, so you can check on that and see how is their work. Do a quick interview, for example. I don't know, before your departure, I need the X number of articles. I need you to get me at least 2 videos, one for the hostel life, one for the city as a destination. Some number of pictures, I don't know, 80 like good pictures, half hostel life, half of the city. Write a couple of social media posts, and you create a job description, you create some KPIs, and then get previous works to analyze and see if you do like their previous work, to see if they really have experience in that. And then you just onboard the volunteer. And I'm sure, I know cases you have a great experience.
Yeah, that's excellent information. Last question with that, is there kind of a, it's a lot easier to see number of hours and what they get when it's a typical volunteer. Does it kind of work the same with travel blogging? Do you say, okay, if this article took you 20 hours to write, you'll get a week of stay, or what's a pretty common work exchange for that?
Well, you need to discuss with the travel blogger during the selection process. If he has the experience, you saw their work, you're just gonna ask them like how long it takes to write a 1-page article, and then they're gonna tell, okay, so if you stay 2 weeks with me, I believe you can give me, 5 articles by the end of the 2nd week, and then you align everything with the travel blogger, how much work he can do during that duration, and then he should deliver that at the end of his stay for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something that has to be worked out, but hopefully that's a good jumping off point for anyone listening who's been wanting to maybe utilize that and not really sure where to start. So we have about 10 minutes left, so let's swing into one of the most important parts of volunteering, where you find them. I know a lot of people, if you're especially in a very destination city or a really popular city, you may get inundated with emails. I probably got 30 or 40 a week from people wanting to come to San Francisco. But even if that is you, how do you sift through them? So an overall question of where are you finding your volunteers, and a follow-up to that, how are you finding even who to remotely choose? You know, you may end up doing Skype interviews and things, but let's start with where do you find them? So Effie, we'll start with you.
Okay, so from Wordpackers, Workaway, Facebook, WhatsApp, sometimes people just send a message, and guests, current guests that are flexible. This is my favorite one, because you know the people, they know the place, it's much easier. After I do this, like they send a nice message in the beginning, then I ask them for a bit more details. If I need depends on their qualities and during the of time that they can stay, then we make a short Skype conversation or WhatsApp conversation. And then they arrive to the hostel and we start the training. I think most people I got was guests that stayed. After that, work away, Wordpackers, a bit less, yes, but it was usually guests that wanted to stay more.
Yeah, awesome. Jamili, Alex, where are you finding most of your volunteers?
Mostly Workaway. They're usually a better fit for us. We do, like, as Sophie said, exchange emails, Skype interview, and then they come. I think over like 2.5 years, we only had like 4 volunteers from Workpackers, and a little bit like guests want to stay longer. And they're like, can we work?
Sometimes people just show up on our doorstep. And yes, there's been times those guys have been some of the best ones. They arrive in the city and they go and knock from hostel to hostel. And if we have a position, we're just like, well, why don't you come in and talk to us for a bit? But yeah, it's usually the past guests who we prefer because
I already know them. You already know what they're gonna act.
Said, if you know them, it's almost like you've already done the interview process. When we were in Carnival, we actually when we had it. He's an Englishman who can't really write very well, so I wasn't gonna hire him right off the bat. Because even though it's Workaway, you might as well send a nice application. And then we ran into him, and he ended up being the coolest guy ever. And so
yeah, he's been with us for like 2.5 months now, and he's been the best.
Yeah.
Well, his application wasn't the best.
Yeah. That's actually one of my pet peeves is emails for volunteers, people who want to be a volunteer, and they didn't take 3 seconds to even try to write it well. Nothing's capitalized, there's no punctuation, and I'm like, I know it's a volunteer spot, but if you won't even put effort into an email, are you going to put any effort into the guests? And maybe they will, like you said, like it can change, but it definitely hasn't given me a great first impression.
Well, that's what I told him. I was like, look, man, you had a terrible application, so if you want to get accepted, we're going to have to talk now.
Terrible photo and a terrible application.
Well, there was something else I was going to say in response to that. Our worst experiences have been from people who actually, after we're like, all right, we do the Skype interview, and then at the end of the Skype interview, they're like, oh, what's the name of your hostel?
Yeah, I'm like, no.
And we're just like, excuse me? We got this far, and you don't know the name of our hostel. We have accepted 2 people who have not known the name of our hostel, and
terrible.
Those were probably the 2 worst volunteers. They can't research it. We've also had some that didn't look up the city, and they got here and they're like, the city's too big. Right before we're about to go on vacation and leave our manager without any staff.
So I think,
but yeah, that's why we like picking them out of
to expectations as we were talking about. But yeah, definitely. I've had some similar Skype interviews. I've gotten emails. I can't wait to come to LA. 10 hours away. Yeah, people just not really taking the time. Juliana, what about you? Where obviously you have the experience of working with World Packers, you've also had the experience of managing volunteer programs. Where are hostels finding their volunteers? How can they utilize these volunteer websites better?
Yeah, well, there are many sources you can get a volunteer. As everyone said, previous guests are a great profile. You know them, they know you, they know how your hostel works. What is the profile of your guests? This is like just amazing. You can have build your own volunteer program if you do have a good website, which you can advertise it and advertise on social medias and recruit your own volunteers through your website and your social media as well. Or you can look for online platforms such as WordPackers, for example, which gives you complete tools to select, to recruit, and to manage a volunteer. It really depends on you, on your personality, on how you like to deal with volunteers. What I do like in online platforms is that you have everything documented, all your conversations, your agreements. You also can keep a trustworthy network because these platforms allows hosts and volunteers to review each other. So I think it really counts when you are recruiting volunteers. So I do like online platforms very much. And of course, there's always walk-ins, emails that you receive oftentimes. It gives you a little bit more work to recruit them. Must to go over some phone calls, Skype interviews, and to make a decision. But sometimes it's like you're only you're trusting people. Relying on online platforms is good because you do have reviews. It's like you have half of your work already done. You feel safe. Getting walk-ins or through emails, you are really trusting people, trusting human beings, which is really nice. So it's up to you to give them a chance or not, and for them to prove that they are really good and they really mean what they say. So there are so many sources. It's really depends on the hostel owner.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything in particular, either with finding volunteers or otherwise, that hostels can be doing better that you've seen in your experience from having a more overarching view of being the liaison between volunteers and hostels? Is there anything in particular they're doing wrong or they should be doing better?
Well, in general, I think the hostel owners should bear in mind that volunteers are not just a cheap manpower. In fact, they should not be seen as a cheap manpower or just, or another paid job. I think the program and the process, it needs to be well structured and give clear expectations prior and during the volunteer stay. As a hostel, you have to put on some energy to onboard that volunteer during his first day. Make sure that he blends into the family. You have to align expectations regarding their tasks, their benefits prior to arrival, their working hours. Do ongoing performance reviews. Make sure that they are doing what's expected from them. Give feedback. Everyone likes to hear feedback. Anyone likes to be praised and see that they are doing a good job, and also listen to feedback. Busy, overwhelmed with so much work and operations that you forget to listen to feedbacks from your volunteers and your staff members that can really help you grow your hostel. It's really pretty much look for online platforms. I think they are great. They have a great database. They have great tools to help you recruit volunteers, and they keep only trustworthy volunteers in the network. And work on your online brand. It's really important, I believe. Even as a volunteer, you always go and check the hostel website and take
Or
a
at
look
least you should.
at social medias, and that's my advice for hostels.
That was great advice. Thank you. That was lots of good stuff. Effie, do you have anything, we're wrapping up now, that you would want to add for hostels who want to use volunteers? Maybe your number one thing to do or your number one thing to not do?
Yeah, I think something important that I don't think many people think about, and I think it's crucial. as the people are coming and doing this volunteering job, they're saving money because they're not paying for the stay, they don't pay for the breakfast. But I think there are many options to make them also get an income. And that means, for example, if it's a beach town like where I'm living, they are using the facilities of the kitchen and making empanadas and selling it at the beach. Or, for example, we have dinner, but we don't have dessert. So they make dessert and sell it to the guests. It's things that I give a complete service for my guests, and I have a volunteer that is happy. So always to try to find other things to do and not to have it 1 month volunteer, come, sleep, get a bed and breakfast, ciao. Because then I think you can't really lift it up and get all the advantages you can, because volunteers or paid worker, it's only a title. You're talking about people, same things. And if you get motivated people, you know how to motivate them, then it can be well paid.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great advice and reminder that just because you're saving money doesn't mean you don't also need to bring in money. So yeah, really good reminder. Jamili, Alex, do you guys have any last words of wisdom for using volunteers?
That, you know, you can always do a lot of good things by not thinking about the volunteers for just specifically what we normally do, which would normally be running those 3 shifts. But there's a lot of volunteers who have a lot of skills beyond that, like the social blogging, social media, web design, who are more than willing to help you with your online presence. You just have to reach out and look a little more for that. Sometimes you can get people who can fix your hostel. And so thinking outside the box of volunteers is not just being someone to cover certain shifts like breakfast and bar, but thinking that, you know, there's a lot of people who might not exactly be good at those, but who can actually work beyond and repaint part of your hostel, and fix, you know, the plumbing or electrical work. A lot of things that you might not be able to do, but can't always afford to maintain. A lot of people will do a lot of things for accommodation, and so.
Yeah, that's great advice. Sorry.
Think outside, you know, the box sort of volunteers. A lot of them like to do lots of things, projects, and they projects, and it's good for the hostel.
I think that's great advice, and just to highlight that point one more time, to remember that even though you may have a lot of guests that are backpackers, you know, that are young and just traveling, you do have a lot of people who have careers back home and are taking a break. So you may very well have a plumber or a very experienced marketer or someone, and they may not talk about it right away because they're on holiday, but you never know. So I think that's a good reminder to think outside the box of volunteers, is you have a lot of skilled people in your hostel, and to potentially tap into that. So that's great. One more thing I wanted to highlight that Effie said earlier that I think was really important, is he was talking with volunteers about, you know, what they say just because they want to please him and maybe get the job versus what maybe they actually mean. And I think this is really important when you're kind of interviewing volunteers and finding the right fit. Is we have an expression we often tell our volunteer staff, actually, when guest screening people to make sure that guests are a good fit, is it's not what they say, it's how what they say makes you feel. So there's a very big difference between someone, if you're like, hey, why do you come into our city? And they're like, I don't know, why do you care? Versus someone being like, I don't know, I just thought it'd be fun. You get a very different vibe. And I think the same thing should go into everything if you're managing hostels, including volunteers. If you ask a volunteer, you know, why they want to come, their answer can be the same words said very different ways. And so that's why I think it can be great to, even if it's just a phone conversation, if it's not Skype, to talk to them ahead of time, because then you are managing those expectations in that way. So that was something that you said, Effie, that I thought was really good, and just wanted to reiterate one more time. So we're going to wrap this up because it's just after the hour, but I want to what is that? I want to thank you guys for joining. This has been really, really helpful. I'm sure all of our viewers who see it, who saw it now or after, are going to get a lot of great advice. If you guys are interested, I can put your contact information in the text area of this so people can contact you if they have any questions. But thank you for contributing, and we will see you guys next month. Ciao.